In the bitter heart of winter, in the year 1862, deep within the frost-laced silence of Kiowa territory near the Arkansas border, a girl stood alone inside a shallow grave carved beneath the roots of an ancient juniper tree whose twisted limbs clawed at the sky like frozen specters. Ayanna, only 18, her wrists still bound, remained unmoving as the villagers formed a ring around her without ever meeting her gaze, some clutching bone charms, while others turned away as though her very presence might stain them. Born of sacred blood, granddaughter to the tribal matriarch, raised with songs older than stone and wisdom passed down like fire, Ayanna had now become the center of shame. They said her womb bore corruption, conceived in violence, hidden in silence, and for that silence they called her cursed. The elder, a man shaped by time and tradition, stepped forward, his face weathered and unmoved, voice cold as the iron sky, proclaiming she had broken the sacred line by allowing a white man's child to take root inside her, insisting her silence had brought dishonor, and that she must now be returned to the earth of spirits to judge her worth. 2 men seized her arms, guiding her gently but without mercy toward the grave, and she walked without resistance, boots sinking into soft soil beneath the juniper as the full moon watched from above, silver and still. The elder lifted a fist of dirt, let it fall on her feet like a verdict, speaking of cleansing, not vengeance, though his eyes flickered with fear. More earth followed, thudding softly on leather and skin, and Ayanna, lips pale but unshaken, whispered through the hush that she did not fear death, only that her unborn child might never be known by name. Then the wind paused, and from the high ridge came a sound not made by men, a low howl echoing like a memory torn from the bone. All eyes turned upward where a black wolf stood silhouetted against the moon, eyes burning like embers, watching her, not them, and the villagers stilled, gripped by something older than law. One man dropped his shovel. The elder, voice now thinned by doubt, ordered the right to continue, but no one moved. Ayanna lifted her face to the wolf, the sky, and the silence that still remembered her name, and in that breathless moment, the world itself seemed to pause. Elsewhere, deeper within the northern woods, the wind prowled through snow-laden pines like ancestral grief, and Waya, a Cherokee hunter with scars no frost could numb, crouched on one knee, ears pricked by the echo of a howl that pulled something ancient from within his chest. He stood, bow slung over his shoulder, and followed the call down a path no longer walked, a trail spoken of only in whispers, said lead to cursed ground where sorrow thickened like fog. His boots crushed untouched snow as he entered a hollow wreathed in frost and memory, trees bending inward like sentinels. There, he found a patch of disturbed earth, not animal but human, too precise, too quiet. The snow had been cleared, the ground pressed flat, and the bitter scent of juniper and sage still lingered in the air, a ritual's remnants. Kneeling, Wyatt touched the soil. It was faintly warm, recently disturbed. No tracks, no breath but his own. Just silence weighted with something unfinished. A memory stabbed through him unbidden. His sister Leote, wild-haired and laughing with berry-stained fingers, followed by the thunder of hooves, the scream of flames, the cavalry's violence that shattered his family. He'd hidden beneath a log, small and shaking, while soldiers raised their camp and his father died with an arrow in his spine. He remembered his mother's final cry and Leote's eyes as they took her, eyes that begged him not to look. Now, staring at this violated earth, that memory returned like blood rising in water. He fell to his knees and began to dig, not with tools, but with bare hands, tearing at the ground until his knuckles split and the snow turned red. He dug faster, breath ragged, fingers broken, until his hand touched skin, cold and lifeless. A wrist limp, then a face emerged, pale and still, lips blue, cheeks like porcelain left in winter. But then, her eyes, they fluttered. A weak cough escaped her throat, soft as a ghost breath, and Wyatt froze, stunned. She was still alive. Gently, reverently, he slipped his arms beneath her body and lifted her from the grave. She weighed no more than sorrow. Her head slumped against his shoulder, and her hand, fragile as a birch leaf, twitched once against his chest. His hand reached down and found hers buried beneath the crusted snow, cold as stone yet clinging to his with a fragile grip that refused to let go. Her eyes, 2 thin slivers of night, cracked open and locked onto his, hollow yet burning with the dim embers of survival. He leaned close, his breath shivering in the cold, and whispered words shaped more by soul than voice. "You are not the end." Then her eyes slid shut again, but her hand did not release him. And so Waya, kneeling in the bloodied snow beneath the indifferent black sky, cradled in his arms a girl the world had tried to erase, and something deep within him stirred, a voice older than guilt and louder than memory that whispered, "Not again." He shrugged off his coat, thick with frost, and wrapped it gently around her, then rose, the wind pressing against him like the weight of history. He turned without hesitation toward the mountains and vanished into the trees. Hours passed, and the night deepened like bruised skin. The wind screamed to the treetops like glass dragged across it as Waya moved uphill with aching steps, shoulders drenched in sweat despite the cold, every muscle aching beneath the weight of the girl pressed to his chest. Breath fogged before him in short clouds, but he never faltered, not until the dim shape of an old shelter appeared, half swallowed by snow, smothered in vines, lost in silence. He kicked the door open with his boot, a sharp crack in the frozen quiet. Inside, the stale scent of smoke, cedar, and forgotten time greeted him. The hearth yawned cold, cobwebbed and empty, and a broken cot lay buried in dust. Carefully, reverently, he lowered Ayana onto a bed of scavenged pelts, gathered from previous hunts, and stepped back to see her face pale as ash, lashes crusted in frost, lips split from exposure. But her chest still lifted barely, like a forgotten promise still trying to breathe. He dropped to his knees before the hearth, struck flint against steel until sparks caught dry moss, and nursed a flame from the shadows. Smoke curled upward like the breath of ghosts, soft and slow. He turned to look at her again. She had not stirred since the grave. Rope burns marred her wrists. Her nails were filled with frozen earth. Her body bore the marks of punishment. But beneath the bruises lay something unbroken, defiance carved into the stillness of her expression. Waya moved toward a sack tucked in the corner, pulled out a bundle of herbs he had dried over many moons, lavender, pine, bitterroot, crushed them in his calloused palms, and cast them into the fire. Warm scent bloomed in the air like old memories. Ayana stirred, her fingers twitching first, then her eyelids fluttering like moth wings. She blinked, eyes darting across the room, pulse quickening with panic as she sat upright too fast, gasping for breath. Her gaze landed on the figure beside the fire, shadowed, still. "Stay back," she rasped, her voice raw and cracked like dried bark. Wyatt didn't flinch. Without a word, he pulled a small blade from inside his coat and placed it carefully on the floor between them. Blade turned away, handle facing her. Then he slid back slowly, hands visible, palms upward in peace. Her eyes flicked from the knife to his face. She coughed again, clutching her ribs. Pain flickered across her features, and the room seemed to tilt. He reached for a water skin, rolled it across the wooden floor until it came to rest at her knees. She stared at it, then at the fire, then at him. He nodded once, calm and unblinking. With caution, she picked it up and drank, each swallow short and measured. Silence returned. Outside, the wind clawed at the cabin walls, snarling like something ancient. But within, the fire spoke in warm crackles, casting amber light that danced across her face. Wyatt removed his damp outer coat and placed it beside her, then leaned back against the far wall, boots soaked, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded. He said nothing more, not when she curled in the furs and let her eyelids fall again, nor when her breathing softened into sleep. As the flames dimmed, he rose quietly, fed more wood to the hearth, then sat back down with a strip of dried meat in hand. He stared at it for a moment before tucking away, his hunger forgotten. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. Instead, he crushed more herbs between his hands and added them bit by bit to the fire, thickening the scent until it blanketed the cabin like comfort. Ayana murmured in her sleep, turning slightly, her voice too faint to make out. His gaze settled on the knife, still untouched between them. He leaned forward, sheathed it, and laid it closer to her side. Then, cross-legged and still, he watched the fire and her slow breaths, whispering in Cherokee, not to Ayana, but to a spirit long buried. "I did not save you, Leot," he said to the memory of his sister, his voice barely audible over the crackle of flame. "But I will not fail her." The fire answered with a quiet pop like the earth breathing. 3 days later, deep in the Kiowa wilderness, the snow fell heavier, cloaking trees in a silence so complete it muffled even thought. Inside the shelter, the fire never died. It pulsed low and steady, a heartbeat wrapped in flame. Ayanna sat close, swaddled in furs, her hands curled around a carved wooden cup Wyatt had once used for ceremonial cedar tea. She hadn't spoken much in days, but that morning her voice, fragile and brittle, broke the hush. "I should have screamed louder," she said, eyes fixed on the flames as if they might answer. Wyatt looked up slowly from where he knelt, cutting bark into thin curls for tea, the knife pausing in his hand, but no words rising to his lips. She stared into the fire, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry truth. "It happened by the stream," she said. "He came out of the trees like shadow, said he was trading salt for deer hide. I told him no. I told him to leave." Her hand began to shake, fingers tightening around the cup, but he was bigger, and no one came. Her voice cracked, but she continued. "Afterward, I ran. I ran home bleeding." She looked away from the fire, her face turned just enough to show the edge of something broken. "They told me to say nothing. They said if I stayed quiet, it would pass. That my mother's name, our bloodline, had to remain clean." Her eyes burned with something that neither cold nor fire could dim. But it did not pass. He left something inside me. Wyatt remained silent, hands working with calm purpose, tying bark into bundles, dropping it into boiling water until the scent of pine and bitter root filled the room like ancient breath. Ayanna continued, not looking at him. "When my mother found out, she cried. But not for me. She cried for her shame, for her name. She told me I would understand one day." Her voice softened like worn cloth. "But I don't understand. I only hurt." Wyatt rose quietly and crossed the room. He sat down before her and reached into his coat. From within, he drew a small cloth bundle and unwrapped it with careful fingers. Inside lay a silver pin in the shape of a running deer, aged and dulled, but still beautiful. He held it with both hands for a moment, then placed it gently in hers. "My mother wore this," he said. Ayanna looked down at the pin, confusion flickering in her expression. "Why give it to me?" she asked. Wyatt's eyes met hers, steady and dark. "Because silence should not be your inheritance." She swallowed hard and clutched the pin to her chest. From that day, something unspoken shifted between them. They didn't speak of pain again, but the silence between them softened, became a kind of trust that needed no words. Days passed like snowflakes falling without sound. While Wyatt hunted small game, Ayanna learned to dry meat, to grind bitter roots into paste that healed cracked skin and aching joints. Color slowly returned to her cheeks. Her movements gained weight, confidence, breath. Her hands no longer trembled. Her belly, once barely visible, began to rise beneath the furs. One evening, she sat beside the fire, palm resting low against her womb, and a faint smile curved her lips without her realizing it. Wyatt saw it, but he said nothing, only passed her a bowl of steaming stew and nodded when she looked up. It had been 3 weeks since the grave. Then came the storm. Wind tore across the ridge like a screaming thing, hurling snow sideways, rattling the cabin until it groaned beneath the weight. That night, Ayanna woke with a cry. Wyatt was at her side before the second breath. She was curled inward, arms wrapped around her stomach, sweat on her brow, her face twisted in pain. "I can't," she whispered, eyes wild. Something's wrong. Blood soaked the furs beneath her. But Wyatt did not panic. He moved quickly, kindling more firelight, heating water in the tin pot, soaking cloth, pressing it to her head, her neck, her wrists. His hands never trembled. She whimpered, gasped through another wave of pain, but he held her hand and whispered in low, "Steady, Cherokee. You are not alone." The hours dragged, soaked in firelight and blood, but when the bleeding stopped, she lay still, spent, eyes closed but not asleep. He wiped her brow gently, knelt beside her, and in a voice meant only for her ears he spoke again. "This child is not cursed," he said. "This child is not shame." His hand rested on her stomach, warm, firm, kind. "And you are not shame." Her eyes opened, slow and heavy, and for the first time since the earth had tried to swallow her, she let the tears fall. Not the loud kind. Quiet, steady tears, warm against skin still chill from fear. Wyatt stayed beside her through the night, his grip never loosening. Outside, the storm began to slow. The snow started to recede, bearing dark soil and frostbitten grass. But on the ridge, riding the wind that carried winter's last breath, something colder than frost began to move. It came not with boots or howls, but with whispers, whispers that ran like cracks through stone. They said the girl who had been buried was not dead. They said a man from another tribe had stolen her, hidden her in the old woods, where no feet dared tread for long. They said the cleansing had failed, that the curse still breathed. The Kiowa elders gathered in silence, their words low, their faces drawn with more fear than fury. Not fear of the girl, but fear that the spirits had turned their backs because the law had not been fulfilled. And so they summoned the only one whose feet could trace her path through both memory and snow. Her brother, Tayan, born of the same mother, only a year apart. Once, he had shown her how to braid her hair by the river's edge. Once, he had taught her how to walk silently through pine needles and follow deer tracks in the mud. Now, the elders sent him not with questions, but with quiet orders. He was a blade cloaked in brotherhood, and they trusted he would know what must be done. He had fought alongside the Plains warriors, earned every scar carved across his skin, and never once questioned the will of the elder council. So when they told him, and the right, he did not argue, did not hesitate. He simply rose, took his bow, and disappeared into the trees. In the hills, Waya moved like wind threading through branches, silent, swift, and always listening. He had learned long ago to track men who wished not to be seen, to read the forest like a language. Broken twigs twisted the wrong way, moss disturbed in unnatural patterns, the sharp stillness of air that felt too quiet. He felt it before he saw it. Someone was following. He told Ayanna with a glance, not with words. The next morning, he placed a bow into her hands, small and worn smooth, and showed her how to draw it. At first, her arms shook, and the string snapped against her wrist in red welts. But he taught with stillness, not praise, and over time her stance hardened, her fingers steadied, and her arrows found their target. He taught her what roots bled healing, which mushrooms burned, how to move without leaving footprints, and how to listen with her whole body. They stopped naming days. They lived like smoke, present only in moments, drifting between pine and silence. One dusk, with fire low and the sky bruised in purple light, Ayanna stepped from camp toward the cedar grove, gathering drywood where the snow had melted back to soil. The arrow struck the ground beside her foot before she heard it. She froze, breath caught, and then from the trees stepped a shadow, Tayan. His face, once boyish, was now chiseled with time, jaw tight, scars old and deep. His bow was already drawn again. Ayanna, he said, low and sharp, you should not be here. Her voice cracked slightly as she stared at him. Neither should you. He did not lower the bow. You were given to the earth, he said. And now you walk as if that meant nothing. Her fingers curled slightly, her back straightened. I didn't ask to live, she said, but I will not beg to die. He flinched, barely, but enough. You carry poison, he said. I carry a child, she answered. The string pulled tighter. But before it could release, Wyatt stepped forward, quiet as thunder waiting to strike, placing himself between Arrow and Ayanna. Stop, he said. Tayan's aim shifted instantly. Who are you to interfere with our law? He demanded. Wyatt didn't move. I am not her kin. I am not her judge. I am only the one who heard her heart under the earth, he said, and spread his arm slightly. If the right must be finished, then kill me first. I am the one who kept her breathing. The wind surged through the trees like breath held too long. Tayan's fingers trembled. His gaze shifted past Waya, to the woman behind him. No longer the girl cast out by silence, but a survivor carved from soil and sorrow. His bow lowered slowly. Then, without a word, he turned and vanished into the dusk, footsteps fading like smoke before rain. Behind Waya, Ayanna exhaled, a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The fire still burned behind them, untouched. Late spring crept in, soft and veiled. On the ridge between Arkansas and Oklahoma Territory, mist coiled through the valleys, erasing the trail behind and ahead. Wyatt stood beside a small fire, eyes lifted to stars as they vanished one by one behind slow-moving clouds. Ayanna packed her things in silence, herbs, pelts, the water skin barely half full. He had not spoken to Tayan since that day, but something had changed in him. The silence he once wore like armor now felt heavier, like grief folded into breath. "We cannot stay," he said at last. She looked up from the fire pit, her hands dusted in ash. "Where will we go?" she asked. He pointed westward, toward the shadowed rise of mountain ridges. "There's a pass," he said. "No laws wait there. Just distance." She nodded, tying the last pouch to her belt. Before they turned to leave, she paused, looking back at the old cabin, the place that had never truly been theirs, yet held the shape of who they had become. She reached for her hair, pulled free a single strand, and tied it gently around a low branch of cedar. "Goodbye," she whispered, not to a place, but to the girl who had once been buried here. Then she followed Wyatt into the mist. The trail ahead was cruel, a jagged spine of stone that bit at their feet and stole their breath. Rain came in fits, soaking their clothes, turning the world to mud. They slept in caves where wolves once slept, ate little, and burned what they could find. Wyatt grew quieter. His steps slowed. Ayanna was first to notice the tremor in his fingers, the dull shine in his eyes. On the fourth night, he stumbled and dropped to his knees. By morning, he could no longer stand. His skin burned. His lips cracked. He muttered prayers in Cherokee, words too old and broken for her to understand. She dragged him beneath an overhang, built a shelter of branches and stone, covered him in every scrap of warmth they carried. Her hands, once shaky, now moved with calm precision. She remembered the tea he had made from crushed bark, the way he wrapped roots beneath the arms to draw out fever. She gathered. She crushed. She boiled. By dusk, steam rose from a pot and filled the cave with heat and scent. She dipped a cloth, wrung it, pressed it to the skin. His breath came in shallow bursts. "I am here," she said. "You do not leave me. Not now." For 2 nights, she did not sleep. She fed the fire with what she could find, scattered mint and sage to keep dark spirits at bay, and whispered his name like a prayer to the mountain, to the sky, to whatever still listened. "Why, she breathed in Cherokee, over and over, "You're the fire in my heart." On the second dawn, he stirred. His breath rasped in his throat. His eyes opened, slow, unfocused, then sharp as they found her. He tried to speak, but she pressed a hand to his chest. "Rest," she said. He nodded faintly, his fingers lifting to touch her wrist. She took his hand and held it. Outside, the mist began to lift.